Members. Thank you. Okay, thank you. The minutes passed.
So I'm going to go vary from the agenda for just 1 minute. I wanted to announce that the governor has officially appointed Brad Furlan to be the chair of the board. Congratulations, Brad. And as Brad alluded to, we have 3 new board members, and I'm going to allow the first official duty of the chair to be to introduce them.
Okay, thank you. So our new members, we have 3 that are joining us tonight for the first time. We have the representative from Windsor, Addison, and Bennington. And why don't we start with the representative from Windsor, Nicholas Burnham. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and that would be helpful.
Okay. Nick Burnham. I'm from Heartland, Windsor County, obviously. Worked for the state of Vermont and with corrections for 30 years. And I adapted hunter.
Oh, welcome. Robert Patterson, Addison County.
Yeah, thank you. I live in Lincoln and been hunting and fishing since I was, well, actually, in the woods. Should say, back when my father was probably 8 years old. He'd send me around one side of the tree to have the squirrel go around the other side. So I do some fishing, and my bigger thing is spend a lot of time with deer hunting. So, Vermont, Canada, Ohio, and anywhere else anybody offers you to go with.
Well, welcome, Bob. Neil, are you on this tonight? I think you're muted, Neil. You can hear us. Still muted. Can you hear us, Neil?
I think I can do this. I can't. Shoot, I thought I could.
Yeah, we're trying to get you unmuted from our end. We're not hearing you.
How about now?
There we go.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So I'm as I said, I've been retired now for 2 years at the end of this June, as an educator. And before that, I was an accountant, CPA in Vermont. I've been deer hunting since age 11. And I think I got my first deer when I was 15 years old. And I learned or took up small game hunting as well when I was in my early 20s, mostly rabbit and grouse. And I think I was fishing since I could ride a bike, but lately I haven't done as much. I'd like to do more.
Well, welcome.
And I'm interested.
Glad to have.
Go ahead.
So before we get to the rest of the agenda, why don't we go around and have all the other board members introduce themselves and the county that they're from, so the public will have a sense of who's here.
Dave Robillard from Orleans County.
Jamie Dragon from Wyoming County.
Michael Colson from Essex County.
Jay Sweeney from Franklin County.
Michael Bancroft from Orange County.
Martin Van Buren from Rutland County.
Brad Furlan, Caledonia County.
And Great Island.
Brian Bailey from Washington County.
Bob Harrison County.
David Dean, Windham County.
Nick Burnham, Windsor County.
Okay, and we have Neil Hogan online. Thank you, everybody. Why don't we start with the staff, the Department of also the Fish and Wildlife Department staff.
So I'm Commissioner, the department, and I'm Christopher Harry.
Sean Fowler, I'm a lieutenant, Northeast Supervisor with Warden Service.
Mark Scott, Director of Wildlife.
Ally Thomas, Director of Outreach.
Josh Morse, Public Information Officer.
Kim Royer, Furbear Project Leader out of the Springfield office.
Nick Fortin, I'm the Deer and Moose Project Leader out of Rutland office.
Catherine Dessing, General Counsel for Fish and Wildlife.
And online, we have staff as well.
Colonel?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Batchelder. I'm the Director of Enforcement for the Warden Service. Wish I could be there.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Eric Palmer. I'm the Director of the Fish Division for Fish and Wildlife.
Okay, welcome everybody. So the next item on our agenda for tonight is public comments. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Know that we have at least one person here in person, and we have a few online. So we'll go with the individual that's here in person first, and then Ally, you can manage the those that are online and plug them in as we go. Sure. Bill, do you want to speak? You want any second public comments?
I'm just here to watch.
Just your watch, okay? Great. Yep, online.
So if you're interested in speaking and you're participating either virtually or on a, well, we'll just go virtual right now and then we'll move to the call-in numbers last. If you can use the raise your hand function, that will be much more efficient. So the first person to raise their hand is Kristen C. from Burlington. Kristen, if you could unmute yourself and you can begin speaking and I'll time you for 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Kristen Cameron. I'm from Burlington, Vermont. I don't like to put my last name because sometimes people come after us. When humans watch a dog kill another dog, it's called dog fighting and it's illegal in 50 states. How is it that a coyote, also part dog and can't even climb a tree like a bear can, being chased down and torn apart by a pack of dogs is legal? Coyote hounding is dog fighting in the woods and even on people's posted property. It should be illegal. Nevertheless, regulations and legislation are about compromise. The petitioner, Mike Covey, who represents sportsmen's organizations and lobbies on behalf of sportsmen, is, quote, looking forward to helping you facilitate the development of thoughtful rules. Because the board and department historically includes the privileged class of sportsmen, just as it did when there were changes to the bear hounding rules several years ago. For equity's sake, as you develop those thoughtful rules, I look forward to you also including organizations like Protect Our Wildlife and the Vermont Wildlife Coalition, who represent thousands of Vermonters who support wildlife protection, including people who have been directly impacted by hounding. This would be a beneficial change from past experiences when voices different from the hardline traditionalist philosophy are dismissed, downplayed, or ignored, as keeps happening about the moose proposal. For how can the department and the board be expected to hold wildlife in public trust for all Vermonters without diversity of thought in the decision-making process? Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. If you could mute yourself, we'll move to the next hand. You can put your hand down too, Kristen. Lisa Jablo, would you like to speak? If so, please unmute yourself and I'll begin timing you when you start.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. During this legislative session, several significant wildlife bills were taken up. S-201 addressing trapping and S-281 addressing coyote hounding are still to be resolved. Legislators now recognize the inherent cruelty of Vermont's trapping practices. Trap lines are too long, there are no bag limits, traps are too big and too cruel, and check times are under-enforced, among other things. Commissioner Herrick has been tasked with crafting a set of less inhumane practices, and the board has been tasked with adopting them. It is important to mention that BMPs do not address the fundamental problems with leg hold traps. Even if they did, they are simply not enforceable. As long as trapping continues, the least that should be done is to tighten things up as per the recommendations Protect Our Wildlife sent the board last week, so that traps do as little damage as possible, are checked more frequently, and animals killed humanely with minimal suffering, among other changes. That is not too much to ask, considering that the majority of Vermonters polled by UVM want to see trapping banned altogether. As for S281, the moratorium on coyote hounding is the most sensible response until an acceptable set of guidelines can be established. The elephant in the room is the issue of control. Dogs primarily respond to visual commands and must be within sight and hearing of their handlers. Any animal behaviorist will tell you that without that, there is simply zero control. A GPS tracker on a dog's collar neither controls them, nor does it tell you if it is chasing a deer, someone's cat, or a coyote. Until hounders can find a way to keep their dogs under control while running them, the collateral damage to livestock, pets, property, non-targeted wildlife, and people's psyches will continue. These days, everything is weaponized, including science, but real science takes no side. It is purely objective. When dealing with lives, objectivity is very difficult to maintain. I hope that you recognize. Thank you.
And Jameson, would you like to speak now? If so, where they're from? Okay.
Yes, I would. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Good evening, Commissioner Herrick and board members. I'm Ann Jameson. I live in Marshfield. I'm the Wildlife Advocacy Coordinator for Green Mountain Animal Defenders, speaking on behalf of our more than 5,000 members. I'd like to acknowledge the more open attitude of cooperation and willingness to listen that has been the case in past years. While I continue to believe the use of leg hold traps and the chasing of coyote with packs of hounds with the intent to kill are inherently cruel and dangerous activities, I understand that S201 and S281 in their now amended form differ greatly from the original intent of a ban. In addition to the minimum standards set forth in S201, GMAD strongly advocates the following: prohibit the recreational and commercial trapping of bobcats, river otters, fisher, mink, and coyotes. These important predators already face threats such as waters polluted by mercury and other chemicals, indirect rodenticide poisoning, and lack of prey species and habitat. For the ecological services they provide, these animals should be protected, not trapped. Ensure that gunshot is the only allowable method of kill. Any non-gunshot method, such as strangling, bludgeoning, stomping on the chest, or drowning, should be prohibited. Require warning signage on public lands, including setbacks from trails and other public recreation areas. Mandate trap checking before noon and report all incidental take within 24 hours. Prohibit drowning in submersion sets, cages, or traps attached to a cable anchored in deep water. GMAD does not believe that coyote hounding can ever be humane.
2 minutes are up.
Thank you very much.
Walter Medwig, would you like to speak?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. You can go ahead and make sure to state where the town of residence, please.
Yes, I'm Walter Medwid. I live in the town of Derby. And I just wanted to make a couple of general comments, nothing about the specifics on tonight's meeting. I know board members are well aware of the various movements calling for change in wildlife governance. The wildlife profession is calling for it, the Wildlife Society, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, Vermont legislative leaders, wildlife advocacy groups, and citizens. There's one important stakeholder group that hasn't been on my radar and perhaps not on yours. This is a group in which 85% agree that perspectives on wildlife in Vermont are changing. The majority of this group feels management should focus more on adapting to change. Almost 90% of this group feels that management prioritizes ungulates over carnivores. And almost half of the group, 4 out of 10, feel management prioritizes politics over science. As you make your decisions, I urge you to fully consider all of the voices concerned with public assets and bringing wildlife governance into today's cultural and ecological landscapes. Perhaps in all of the controversies, there is one thing we can agree on. Adapting to change from within is better than adapting to change by mandate. Oh, and by the way, that stakeholder group I referenced, those are the employees of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. I hope you will consider their interest as well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Okay, Jane Fitzwilliam, would you like to speak? If you would, you need to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you.
There it is. I'm looking for buttons. Can you hear me now?
Town too.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Jane Fitzwilliam in Putney, Vermont, and I'm representing the Vermont Coyote Coexistence Coalition. And I don't see how the Fish and Wildlife Board can regulate coyote hounding or leg hole trapping to make the activities safe and less inhumane. These activities should be banned outright, but we are interested in participating in future conversations and learning what Fish and Wildlife has to offer the public and our wildlife. We also look forward to discussing a regulated coyote hunting season versus the current open season that is not based in science nor grounded in hunting ethics. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah Gorsline, would you like to speak?
Hi, yes, thank you. Is everyone hearing me okay?
We are. Make sure to state your town of residence, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah. I live in Grand Isle currently, and I am a Vermont landowner. I also work with the organization Project Coyote, which is a national wildlife organization. We are a science-based organization that advocates for coexistence strategies with coyotes that can be financially beneficial both to townships and to farmers and ranchers. We have models of coexistence strategies that involve diverting funds away from wildlife services to more practical forms of coexistence, including fencing, guard animals, and use of lighting to properly coexist with predators. I appreciate the board hearing this issue today and considering Senate Bill 281. I wanted to speak in favor of that bill. We believe that coyotes are important keystone predators. We know through science-based research that the hunting of coyotes, particularly alpha pack members, only leads to the further propagation of more coyotes. So we're trying to bring science to the general public, to Fish and Wildlife, to properly speak to these issues and how they affect the rest of the Vermont public. I also wanted to bring up the fact that coyote hounding violates Vermont landowner rights. Hounds can't be controlled meaningfully on private lands, whether or not they're marked. So I appreciate that the board is sending, that you are going to try to find meaningful solutions to those issues, which we've heard repeated through firsthand accounts in these committee meetings. I also just wanted to bring up that baiting for coyotes, which is frequently done with hounding practices, actually leads to more wildlife-human conflicts. And we've heard first-person testimonial in some of these committee hearings of landowners who have found bait piles near their properties, which are actually drawing in predator species. I appreciate the time and thank you for your consideration.
Now, if there's anyone, let's see here. So with the call-in numbers, I guess what I'll do is I'm going to say the phone number, and if that's you and you want to speak, say something, okay? So 802-272-5066. Do you have anything to say?
No.
Thank you. The next number is 802-586-2588. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Dave Kelly. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Vermont Wildlife Coalition. We've submitted comments on the trapping and the hounding issue both. But I wanted to simply add that whether we're talking about hounding or trapping, that bludgeoning, stomping, choke pulls are not and shouldn't be recognized as ethical means of killing a hunted animal or trapped animal. And I thought it was important to emphasize that orally as well as in our submitted comments. And I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Did you state your town of residence?
I'm from Greensboro, Vermont. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right, the next number is 802-595-2979. Would you like to speak?
Yes.
Okay, you have 2 minutes for name and town, please.
My name is Jerry Huck. I'm from Roxbury. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input. I'm also a board member of the Vermont Wildlife Coalition, and we did send all the details in 2 letters, but I won't repeat what's been said. I would just ask that you take a common sense approach and consider all Vermonters when you're making your decision. During the legislative session, we did hear from or about families and individuals who have pretty valid concerns regarding hounding especially, and some trapping as well. Some have had to deal with pretty terrible situations, and based on what we hear from the public, just us as an organization, a lot of people are not willing to come forward and testify. So we get to hear about a fraction of the issues that are out there. And so I would just ask that you just consider the Vermonters who have these conflicts. Sometimes they're just inconvenience, but sometimes they can be quite serious and they can involve injuries or the death or injury of a pet. So thank you again for the input, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who is virtually participating who may have just joined us that wants to speak for 2 minutes during the open comment period?
Yes, this is Marion Guillen. I would like to on Nichols Pond. I'm sorry, I was just let in and I don't know if you're on to the next subject or still doing the hunting thing.
This is just open comment period, so you can speak for 2 minutes if you state your name and town, please.
Okay, so I can change to the Nichols Pond thing?
Yep.
Okay, yes, name and what, sorry?
Your town of residence.
Okay, my name is Marion Guillen. I live in Morrisville, Vermont, and I'm talking regarding the ice fishing at Nichols Pond. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to weigh in. What I mentioned the last meeting still applies, but I'd like to add something and ask a question. After the last meeting, in talking with my sister, we solved the mystery of the one person who said they had permission to use our beach to access the lake. Short version, permission was given by an in-law, not my brother or sister and I. She had several emails with the person. We had no issues with that particular person after we let them stay because somebody had given them permission. However, he reported that there were several other individuals using our beach for access, going right on by the no trespassing signs. And when he attempted to ask who gave them permission and said that he had permission, but who gave them permission, the individuals did not ask, oh, how do we get permission? But instead were, quote, hostile towards him and swearing at him. And he was, quote, flipped off, which, you know, we asked him not to please not put himself in that risky situation again, but that's kind of unsettling, which leads me to my question. Are there any other bodies of water open to fishing that are surrounded by private land? If not, why are we? And if so, how are they making it work? As we have no public access. So like I said, if there's no other lakes open that are surrounded by private land, why have we put into that position? And if so, how are those other ones making it work? We just feel a bit vulnerable with lots of folks. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, some of them unpleasant, wandering around all our properties when no one's there, no public access, and no policing. If you decide to keep it open, how do we make it work for everyone? Safe, lawful access and protection for the landowners. Thank you. Safe, lawful access and protection for the landowners.
Is that everybody who'd like to comment virtually, or if you're participating on the phone and you haven't yet?
That's it? Okay. Okay, well, thank you everybody for your comments. Very helpful. And as we move forward in these areas of trapping and coyote hunting with hounds, we'll be certain to take into consideration everything we've heard up to this point and moving forward. So thank you again. Okay, next item on the agenda are two petitions. The one that was presented to us at last meeting, a petition to close Nichols Pond to ice fishing. That was presented to us by the Nichols Pond Association, Camp Association. And we as a board forwarded that on to the department to review and come back to us with a recommendation to the board on how to deal with ice fishing. So with that said, I will turn it over to the commissioner.
Yep, and I'm going to, we did exactly what we were asked to do. And so for that update, I will turn it over to the director of our fisheries division, Eric Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. We did send a recommendation out to the board. Hopefully you all received that by email late last week. Our recommendation is to deny the petition. We went through the four elements that the petitioners raised related to public access, vulnerability of seasonal camps in the winter, conservation of the trout population, and ice safety for anglers. And I'd be happy to go over those again if folks want. How would you like to proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Probably should do that because not everybody privy to the.
Yes, so please, if you would walk us through each one of those and go into a little bit of detail on that, that would be helpful.
Sure. The first one was there's no suitable public access in the winter. That's the most complicated. We did talk to the town of Woodbury and looked at the town roadmap that is provided by VTrans. That does show a class 4 road that goes to the Nichols Pond Dam. The town told us that that was still a town road open to the public. And they understood that there was a gate on there with the names of the Nichols Pond Association, Hardwick Electric Department, and the Hyde Corporation. And it's a little bit complicated because I think, Mr. Chairman, you talked to some members of the Meyer family that are also associated with the Hyde Corporation, and they said that there's some confusion, that there's actually two roads that go down there parallel to each other, but that it sounds like they were at least open. They leave their road open during the summer for public access and weren't opposed to winter access as long as it can be done safely. Is that a correct paraphrasing?
Well, I would just say, because I was surprised when I heard that it was a class 4 road. And so I reached out to members of that association to get their position on whether or not they thought it was a class 4 road. And they did not believe that it was a class 4 road, and that the access road that people had used to get down to the lake, to the pond, that the individual that I spoke to said that that is a private road, and that's why it's gated and has been gated. And that there used to be an older class 4 road that runs basically parallel to that road. And so it gets confused when you look at the map, that it's easy to understand why people think the access road is a class 4 road when it's actually an older road that runs almost adjacent to it. So I think there's some confusion as to what the classification of that access road. So
Yeah,
I think
so
we need to be very careful that we don't, if in our opinion, if we choose to keep it open, we don't do it based on the fact that it's a class 4 road if we're not 100% sure that it is a class 4 road. That's the point that I think I was trying to make to you, Eric, on the conversation.
right, right. So we need to look into that some more. But the town of Woodbury said that there is a town class 4 road that goes to the dam. So we want to look into that more. Related to the question that was asked, there are lakes in Vermont that are entirely private ownership of the shoreline that are open to fishing. They're, for example, Little April, where public access is across private land with the landowner's permission. Same situation on Caspian Lake, where the town of Hardwick Electric owns a beach and allows public access through that beach, but it's not state ownership. And so we leave those waters open to fishing because there is angler access to those waters, and that's been our understanding for Nichols Pond for the summer at least. And we'll certainly look into that more for winter access and follow up with the town of Woodbury and the Meyer family. Are there any questions on that part of the department's response? And second was seasonal camps being vulnerable in the winter to vandalism. As the petition states, there's prior history of this, and for folks that were at the last meeting, I believe Mr. Barron stated that there's no known vandalism this winter. So not directly related to opening ice fishing. And in fact, our position is that allowing ice fishing is likely to make the camps around the pond safer, both because of the presence of ice fishermen themselves or ice anglers, and also the fact that our state game wardens are more likely to patrol a water body in the winter when it's open to fishing. In fact, Game Warden Searcy indicated that he patrolled Nichols Pond about 10 times this winter. So we feel that the camps are likely to be safer in the presence of ice fishing. Does the board have any questions on that element?
Yes, Eric, we do have a question. David?
What's patrol mean? That's a word without a definition in my mind.
So
Patrol. What?
So my understanding is that in the past, when the lake was closed to ice fishing, that the wardens would occasionally visit the lake, and mostly just to make sure that no one was there fishing out of season. So I believe Sean Fowler, Lieutenant Fowler, is in the room there and could speak to this, but my understanding is that Warden Searcy went to the pond, checked anglers, talked to anglers, looked at the place where they were getting on the ice near the dam site, and did that approximately 10 times this winter.
Sean, you have anything else to add?
What Eric said is exactly correct. When there means patrol, that's exactly this. Wardens are out there checking for compliance with different fishing regulations. There was one documented incident of either an ATV or a snowmobile that had gone across my property. It was after the fact, evidence left in the snow. But other than that, there weren't any issues that we documented well.
So the warden actually puts eyes on the thieves.
I'm not going to say the warden walks physically around every single thing.
Eyes on. Whoops. Sees, oh, the devil burn down.
Yeah, I mean, if the warden saw there was a burn down camp, probably not. He's not there looking for camp security. He's there checking compliance for fishing ranges, which is no different on this body of water than any other body of water that we know.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
All right, the third issue that was raised in the petition was conservation of the trout population. And the department's response is that the species in question, the lake trout and rainbow trout in Nichols Pond, are stocked there by the department to provide fishing opportunities. Ice fishing is an additional opportunity, and our research on other water bodies hasn't shown a negative impact from opening ice fishing and allowing that additional winter recreation on trout populations. Any questions on that?
I don't think so.
Okay, and then the fourth issue raised in the petition was the issue of ice safety, especially with access at the outlet by the dam. And we agree that ice safety is an important consideration. That's not just an issue at Nichols Pond. There's plenty of water bodies that have inlets, outlets. Use the example that, you know, much of Lake Champlain doesn't freeze in some years. Oh, I'm getting an echo. And that, you know, anglers even fish on setbacks of the Connecticut River. So it's, you know, we don't feel that Nichols Pond is unusually unsafe. And when Warden Searcy patrolled, he didn't see anything that gave him any major concerns for angler safety where they were accessing the pond. And then there's also the issue, as we know, of people complaining about anglers crossing private property without permission. And that's something we hope can be addressed going forward with additional postings. But when there are postings and there's illegal trespass, that is something that the wardens can be contacted to address. So that, in a kind of quick overview, is the department's reasons for recommending that the petition be denied, and we do not have the board undertake rulemaking to change the open season for ice fishing on Nichols Pond.
Any questions? So I have a quick one, Eric. Does not knowing for certain at this point have an impact on the road, being whether it's a class 4 or whether it's a private road, at this point have any impact on your recommendation?
We would still recommend that ice fishing be allowed on the pond without having certainty on public access. Yes.
I think it'd be nice to clarify that for the fishermen and moving forward, just so that it doesn't create any turmoil during fishing come this winter.
We agree.
Fishermen do have access to that road, it's a class 4 road, then I think they should correctly know that. But if they don't, and it is a private road, then I think everybody should know that as well too, just so that it doesn't create you know, a situation that we could avoid.
I agree completely. We thought we had done due diligence by checking with VTrans, checking the maps, talking with the town of Woodbury. They obviously knew the road well, knew the gate. So when we got that information from you that the Myers family had researched this and felt strongly that it was not the same as the class 4 road shown on the town maps, that was, you know, news to us. So for next steps, we want to meet with the town of Woodbury and with the Myers and sort through this. It sounds like the Myers, despite feeling very strongly that they clearly own that road, have allowed anglers to access it in the summer for years. So I'm hoping that we can find a good solution there. Just to be clear with the board as well, we're not expecting a lot of ice fishing pressure here. This isn't a place where we're looking to develop a road or put in an access. We think that the informal access that's been allowed in the past is sufficient, but we just want to make sure that we have clear agreement on who owns the road and whether or not anglers have permission to use that road going forward. And we don't want anglers to approach it misinformed and thinking that they're on public property if they're not. So yeah, we fully intend to look into that further.
How long is it going to take to resolve this issue, would you say? And the reason I'm asking the question, put it in context, is it necessary to vote on this evening? Because ice fishing season is a ways off, I think. And if we can resolve this road issue, that was my major concern. Whether or not people are gaining access to private property. And so if we can resolve this, then I could go clearly up or down. But I don't want to delay this forever.
Yeah, David, if we knew that this road was private for sure, and that it was gated and that anglers were not allowed to use it, we would still recommend leaving the lake open to ice fishing. There's the possibility for folks to get permission to cross private property. There's the camp owners themselves that would have the opportunity to fish the lake. We wouldn't close it based just on this one road being public or private. But we fully intend to look into it because that has been the way that folks have accessed the pond historically, and we want to make sure that if they're going to continue to do that, that we know that they're doing it legally or with proper permission.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Eric? Any comments or any action anyone wants to take?
I will, based on the recommendation of the department, Eric, very complete response to the petition. I would make a motion that we deny the petition submitted by Kurt Barron to the
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to accept the petition, to deny the petition presented to us to close vehicles to ice fishing. And we have a second. Okay, so let's take votes.
I'm going to ask them to slow the actually.
I don't think it'll make a difference. Not gonna make a
I
difference.
but I might have my information.
I think you have to act on the motion, and if the motion is denied, you can submit a motion that this petition gets delayed. That'd be a motion that you could then file. We have to act on the first one. And you could, if that's, let's say it fails, this motion that was made fails, then you could make a motion that you want this delayed, and then we can vote on that.
This motion is not going to fail.
It may not, but that's the first motion on the floor.
Yeah, it is. And the rules, like the meeting process, rules, order, and all. And Catherine, you can jump in if you want, if we're headed down the wrong path here, but I think that's
Not my area of expertise.
okay. Well, it is precedent. Yeah.
You can rule it out of order. But it takes a vote of the board can vote to move down. I can go to the motion.
The motion is second. Yeah, well, there is a motion and a second on the floor to reject the petition. So I will call the vote on that. And if it fails, it will go to, you can make the motion.
I believe what David is saying is he made a motion. I made a procedural look at it.
Okay.
And I want it on the record.
Yep.
And you move it out of order, you go to vote, or whatever, but I want my motion to delay this 1 month. Be on the record. I'm not sure I quite understand you. You said my motion was out of order?
No.
No. Oh,
No. I mean that David's motion is out of order because we already have a motion and a second on the floor to deny the petition. So as chair, I'm going to say we're going to move forward with that motion and seconds and that motion. For the record. Okay. So for the motion that's on the floor, we'll take a roll call vote. All those that are in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. And anybody who's abstaining, indicate so as well.
So this, just so it's clear, yay is to
deny the petition. Yes, yes is to deny the petition, and no is to accept the petition. So, Nicholas Burnham.
Question.
A vote would be to, they not to accept my, would be, it would not be acceptance.
Your motion is to reject the petition, deny the petition. So all those in favor of your motion signify by saying yes. So a yes is no to the.
But a no is not a yes. No is not a yes. David will make a motion to table it.
Yes. Fair point. Nicholas. Yes. Jay Sweeney.
Yes.
Brian Bailey.
Yeah.
Robert Patterson.
Yeah.
Brian McCarthy.
Yes.
Brad Ferlin, yes. Mike Bancroft.
Yes.
Marty Van Buren.
Yes.
David Dean.
Yes.
Mike Colson.
Yes.
Jamie Dragon.
Yes.
Dave Robillard.
Yes.
Matthews. Yes. Neil Hogan.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. So the yes have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 yeses. 1 absent and 1 abstention. Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, and we'd be happy to come back with an update to the board as we learn more about the road issue.
Okay. And Commissioner.
Thank you.
We'll notify the petition.
Okay. So the next item under this category is the petition to regulate coyote hunting with mouths. And I think all of you have received also a copy of that. And that is from Mike Covey, the Executive Director of Vermont Petition Coalition. And I will just read it here briefly. It's a quick map. Mr. Covey wrote to, I'm writing a petition. I'm ready to petition you to regulate the use of hounds for hunting of coyotes. We feel this is a valuable practice, but we do see the need for regulation. We look forward to helping you facilitate the development of thoughtful rules surrounding this practice. That was received by the board on May 4th. Any comments from any of the board members? Any thoughts about the petition? Not, so I'll ask Department, do you have any thoughts?
We do. So later on tonight, I'll be giving an update on the petition regarding traffic, the process that the department's going to recommend. And with that in mind, I would ask the board accept this petition and direct the board, just like you did on the traffic petition, to come back with a plan that we should act on it. And I will say that it is timely, but we're also going to be fully expecting the governor to sign S-281, which is parallel, if not very close to what we will be doing with respect. The department makes that recommendation to the board.
Vice Person. Is Mike Covey online?
Unless he's a call. Oh, yeah, he is. Mike Covey is online.
Mike, if you're online, do you have, do you want to say anything about the petition?
Certainly.
10 minutes if you want to speak to your petition.
I think I can be fairly brief. Thank you. Mike Covey, Executive Director, Vermont Traditions Coalition. I submitted that petition. You'll note it's very, very brief, just to get the ball rolling. I think it's going to be important moving forward on this, as it will be with the trapping petition, to focus on utilizing those who engage in the activity. The department has great resources in a lot of places, but in terms of having that institutional knowledge, that's what they need in order to avoid pitfalls. So it's going to be critical for the department to work with the stakeholder group that's going to be most impacted, that being the hounding community in this case, very closely, to ensure that something isn't brought before the board in terms of suggestions for regulations that are going to have inherent pitfalls. The legislature has made it clear by changing this bill so drastically from a ban to a request or a demand to regulate the practice. That's a very clear statement that this practice has value. So we don't want to lose any of that value by having folks who are not engaged in the practice itself inadvertently creating pitfalls because they've inadvertently failed to draw upon that institutional knowledge that is so critical. All of you are hunters in various different fashions, or most of you, I presume, are hunters in various different fashions. You know that there are dynamic field conditions that need to be considered when contemplating how something can be regulated without inadvertently being ended. We've heard a lot of discussion tonight from the public comment portion, talks about or ideas that the sporting community is somehow a privileged class because the department has traditionally worked closely with them to promulgate rules. Well, I have a friend who speaks regularly about the need to seek wise counsel. And that's really what it comes down to. When you're going to regulate a practice, you need to seek wise counsel. And there's nobody who is more valuable in that regard than the people who are actually practicing the activity, regardless of what that activity is. So I have, to that end, started already working with several Coyote Hounds people to come up with a derivative set of rules, working back from the bear rules because they are distinct species. And we should have a presentation or a proposal available shortly. I've been bouncing it back and forth to make sure that we're not missing anything. We had kind of a similar process with the petition you received from the Trappers Association to ensure that it was going to actually provide value. Once we've done that, I'm hopeful that Commissioner Herrick and his team will sit down with us, and then we can discuss any disparate points of view on what we have available and move forward from there. But for now, I agree with Commissioner Herrick. Tonight is the night to get this process going. I strongly hope that the board will determine that it's worth taking this petition up and that we can start to move forward.
Thank you, Mike.
I want to remind people there's no more public comment. Hands up.
Correct. So just a reminder to everybody else that there is no more public comments. This was a petition presentation to the board, and the individual making, or the organization making the presenting the petition has an opportunity to spend 10 minutes talking about the petition to the board. So that's what Mike's role is in this. And so public comments are over. Any questions for Mike? Anybody? Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
One comment that I think I agree that there should be some participation from your group, Mike. You certainly are the people that are I'm hesitant to say impacted the most, because I think this is going to have impact on a number of people as well that aren't part of the sport, and we have to really consider the impact that this will have on them as well. It's brought us to this point, is this is impacting others, and it's not self-regulating, so we're gonna, the legislature said we got to do something. So I want to shut out these other groups that I know that we sometimes are put off by their positions, but I think that we have to consider other stakeholders.
If I may, the problem that I perceive with that is that these other stakeholders have no reason to help move this process forward. They've stated very plainly that their desire is to end this practice. And with the moratorium attached to S281, it effectively does end this practice until such time as the board has promulgated rules. So if a stakeholder whose desire is to end the practice were to be a part of a working group and were to utilize that position to drag the process out and slow it down, they could in effect end the activity by simply preventing the process from moving forward at a reasonable speed. I hear what you're saying, but I think that there will be public meetings. There must be public meetings. I don't think that I know that. And those public meetings are the opportunity for those folks, again, who have very plainly stated, we want to see this ended. You've heard it this evening, that, you know, the statement that there's no way to make this humane. So if you have someone who's that monolithic in their position and that monolithic in their opinion, and you provide them the opportunity to slow the process down with this moratorium in place.
Mike, I think you misunderstood my comment. I'm not saying they need to be part of the decision making, the rulemaking process, but we have to consider the impacts as the board. I think we have to consider the impacts that whatever we come up with. We want to be very careful in this process, so we're not revisiting this over and over and over like we had.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the iterative process of the board does that very well.
I will make a recommendation that sort of, I think, goes a little further, but it supports your position. If we do not involve the people that our petitioner is so concerned about, we will be in front of the legislature again, and S 129, which would take away rulemaking authority from this board, will be back in front of the legislature. And now, all I can say is putting people in a position where they absolutely have to come up with an answer. Okay? That can involve all manner of opinions about the answer that you're trying to come up with, including people who are opposed to it, because they get to vote no. It really is, they really are opposed to it. But if the people that pushed this issue to the point that it got to in the legislature last year are not involved in the discussions, I don't need 2 minutes to comment on a proposed rule at a public hearing, but to sit down and be part of the conversation, coming back. There's not going to be any mess on this. And I'll defer to the commissioner's observation. I have never seen the legislature as adamant about the trapping and the hounding issue to bring up a bill that would take back rulemaking authority from the Fish and Wildlife Board. We did that a lot of years ago. And there was a good reason for doing it. And for them to even suggest that they would take it back just astounds me. So the ground is shifted.
And I just want to comment. I think that some of the things I've heard and obviously have been relayed to the legislation are misinformation. And when people act on emotions on misinformation, you're right, things may get, it gains traction. And I'm looking forward to future discussions about this, but that's all. I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of misinformation about some of this activities, and I've heard it again tonight. I've heard it nonstop, and it's just simply not true. And, but it gets reiterated, and at some point, you know, some people start believing maybe there is some factual basis to it. And I look forward to the future discussion.
Marty, you have a question?
So Mike, how many hounders are you talking to now? How long do you need to start something or get something going for us?
I think we'll have something available probably within the next week. You know, when you pull too large of a group together, you can't get anything done. So there was a request put out, and in my opinion, you know, I made a commitment to several legislators that we would help facilitate getting this done. I take that commitment seriously. The folks that showed up are the folks that I'm taking input from, and this may sound coarse, but if folks cared enough to be a part of that, they would have been there. I understand that that's not true for everybody. Some folks have conflicts, but I think that with the pressure that the moratorium puts on this process, I think that's a reasonable position to take. So the handful of individuals that showed up, I've sent language back to based on conversations we've had about working off my template and making adjustments to that. And I anticipate hearing back from them within the next week and being ready to sit down at any point beyond that.
Any other comments or questions on the or Mike or on the petition in general?
So the next step would be is if we vote to act on this petition tonight, is to accept it, to give the department a chance to craft some rules that we can then review. Then if accepted, would go to public comment, and then like the deer rules, we do the same thing before we finalize anything, right?
I think a better way, a more accurate way to describe it would we would come back at the next meeting with a plan and a timeline on how the department is going to come up with recommendations for the board. There's no way we're going to get it done in that short period of time. And a good example of what I'm talking about, will be talked about shortly. Too bad we didn't have the agenda flip-flop, then you'd have a good example.
And I apologize for my failing memory, but haven't we asked the professional staff to do that, to come back with a timeline on trapping and hounds based on our discussion of the legislature action?
We've done it for trapping. Because we had a petition that we accepted and the board accepted and acted upon.
And we did it for the, what was the petition we had last week? Didn't it? It was coyote hunting in general.
Yes.
Establishing a season, a closed season. That's what we dealt with last.
Okay, so those two are still being addressed by the professional staff.
Yeah.
But the proposals to
We have a report tonight on trapping.
Is it S201 that deals with the hounding?
No, 201 is trapping, 281 is hound hunting of coyotes.
Okay.
And 29 board authority, which has never got off the wall.
So much like
We'll do something with hounding, it will.
with this petition, we also have running kind of parallel routes paths is S281, which is somewhere out there at this point somewhere between the legislature and the governor signing it.
It hasn't been sent to the governor for signature yet.
Okay, so at some point, he will act on that bill, whether he signs it or not, but let's just assuming he signs it at this point. Then what we have is the petition to move forward with this request, and we have that bill be law to act on as well too. At that point, we would merge these two together and approach hounding.
I think yes, and I'm going to defer to Mark because he's been through this way more. But we would look at all relevant petitions, including the season, the 281, this petition by Mr. Covey, And when you look at it, we just need to look at it as a holistic review that encompasses all those elements. Anything else that would make sense. Is that a fair way to put it?
Perfect. Your last statement was really good. Anytime we open a rule to amend it, we look at all aspects of that rule. Sometimes that may involve looking at other regulations that affect that rule, to make it better. And working with our esteemed colleagues, the science and our attorney, law enforcement, make sure on a 2-foot basis, looking at it, that it's sound biologically and that we improve it to be enforceable. That it meets the intent of legislature. So commissioners absolutely. So that's what we will do. And David Dean alluded to that, that opened the door. But what's happened is there's more and more coming down the pike on this. So for board members, I don't know if anybody was here through the whole process we did with the Bear Hound Association petition, but we went a lot different than the original petition. They just wanted to deny people from New Hampshire to come here, train their hounds, not bear hounds. That we looked at a whole bunch of issues. That was, and we told them that, no, we cannot in good faith open a rule, not do what the commissioner said. So, and we ended up all agreeing eventually after a long time. That 1 or 2 that probably didn't get exactly what they want, probably told me, I'm like, which we never could support. So, sorry, there's a public process that plays out, and I think it mimics what many of you folks have said, and mimics what you said, Jay, too. We need to look at all the issues that come forward and all the interested people in the state. I see you have several more petitions coming down that we'll get to the board and we'll get to this topic.
And on that, what makes this email difference between a public comment and a petition is the word petition, correct? You only need one person to petition the board?
Correct.
Okay.
By statute.
Yeah.
I think I'm safe in saying that we're going to open this rule anyway. And in light of that, to me, it's a no-brainer. I make a motion that we take up this petition.
I second that. Okay. Any other comments? If not, I will call a vote on that motion to accept this petition as presented tonight. Okay, all those in favor of accepting the petition, signify by saying yes. Opposed to accepting it, no. And anybody abstaining indicates so. Nicholas Burnham?
Yes.
Jay Sweeney?
Yes.
Brian Bailey?
Yes.
Robert Patterson?
Yeah.
Ryan McCarthy?
Yes.
Brad Ferlin, yes. Mike Bancroft?
Yes.
Artie Van Buren?
Yes.
David Dean?
Yes.
Mike Colson?
Yes.
Jamie Dragon? Dave Robillard?
Yes.
Nancy Matthews, absent. And Neil Hogan?
Yes.
$13 yeses. 1 absent. Okay, petition is accepted. Thank you, Mike. All right. Moving on to item number 4. I haven't had a word of pizzas here yet, so okay. Then item number 4 is the final vote on the 2022 Analyst deer hunting and youth weekend proposal. So I will turn that over to the department to make its final presentation to us.
Somebody to start. Yeah, well, you're taking, okay, thank you, Commissioner. So I guess that we've held the 5 physical public hearings, information public hearings we have with the board. We held 1 virtual. To do those. Some of those were in May, and we held 2 recently. And we're in March, and we held 2 recently in May. And I'm almost thinking all board members that were here, except the new ones, went to at least one of those hearings. Is that my memory? Not put you on the spot, but I think most of you which was awesome. Showed up at one or two, not to call out people, but Brian Bailey and Marty, I think, and you folks traveled some distance, went to almost all of them. So on behalf of the department, thank you for doing that at the public hearing. So that is great. And for new board members, when we do these each year, we're hopefully you'll be able to participate. We also had law enforcement representation high in the department at the hearings. The attendance was relatively low, but it was valuable. We took them seriously. All the people that came, we reported all the comments. You have them in your appendix that you did, and any questions that were raised, we wrote them down, and the answers, our responses are in your appendix on the report that I sent you. This big one here updated. So thanks for your. My overall observation is I've got to give hats off to our new program manager, David Sawsville, who's overseeing the game program, and our project leader, Nick Fortin, for doing an outstanding job. I think all of you can attest the excellent job how the hearings went. They were organized well, good, safe public places, and Nick just did an outstanding job as he did on the Moose hearings, making sure that every question that was raised or issue was responded to. I don't know what more we could do. It was great. We even had a couple of ones I went to. I know some people clapped and thanked us for coming here. That's something different than when I started in this department in 1982. We had to have a lot of security to get back to our vehicle and get home on Jeffrey Street to Vermont. So obviously the Vermont Deer Hunters came. So what I thought we need tonight is for new board members too. You really haven't missed anything. Is the key vote. There's one vote on this sort of procedure, and that's tonight that the board needs. So if you feel comfortable, you had a chance with the here to participate and ask questions too. I'm not going to go into details, but I thought Nick is here to answer them. But I thought, Nick, if you could put up on the screen the recommendation that we need your vote on tonight, I thought that would be helpful. And actually, I think we put it up there at the last meeting when we had a discussion, which was great. And I think during the public hearings, a couple of times, people from the public asked us to put it back up there so they could see it. So I'd like to turn it over to Nick now, and if you could highlight to us the final recommendation, and it has not changed at all from what you heard back in early April. Yeah, early April or late April. So, thank you.
Yeah, so this is the same recommendation you all received in April. Nothing has changed. We had very few comments at the public hearings, particularly the May hearings, and really none suggesting anything different, except honestly maybe increasing opportunities in some places. But we feel this is a good place to be. And so again, just to reiterate, there are three parts to our recommendation. One is that antlerless hunting is allowed statewide during archery season. The board does have authority to close individual WMUs if they wanted. The youth and novice season, 1 deer of either sex, again, statewide, and that would include any buck, meaning no antler restriction. It has always been that way, but again, the board has authority to tweak that. And then a total of 19,400 muzzleloader antlerless permits distributed by WMU as shown in the map. They're specific to an individual WMU. Those are slight tweaks from 2020, but pretty close, pretty similar numbers that we had. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
And can you remind just for the new members also that issuing 19,400 permits will likely result in how many actual deer to harvest?
Right. So that's an important thing for the new members that haven't seen the presentation 6 times.
You go to the hearings, you're going to see this again.
So fill rate on muzzleloader antlerless permits is average is 15% statewide. So 20,000 permits would kill 3,000. So we're not trying to kill anywhere near that many deer. I'm trying to kill, I think it works out to just over 3,000 deer in muzzleloader season. People get really caught up on the number, the high number of permits, but
only because the fill rate's pretty low.
Yeah, good. I did listen to your presentation on the line. It was excellent. And I also read all the comments and your responses. They were spot on. Excellent job.
Thanks.
I think just, most people didn't come and show up. I think they're pretty happy really right now. So better than us. Let's hope. There wasn't too many people in these meetings. 20.
Any other questions or comments with feedback for Nick?
The only comment I'd like to make, and I had the opportunity to make it once at a public meeting, and I refrained from doing it on Facebook, but there was one comment in the comments we received about doing this for the money. Some of you have been here longer than I have. I'm in year 4. We've never had a discussion, for all you listening, we've never had a discussion about dollar figures when it comes to permits for wildlife management. So make that clear right now. It's not about the money.
Okay,
So, Mr. Chairman, is the motion in order?
and motion is in order.
Then I move that we approve the agency's recommendation for the youth and archery and level 1 season.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other comments? Okay, if not, I'll call the vote on that. All those in favor of accepting the recommendation of the department as presented on the board, signify by saying yes. Opposed, no. Nicholas Burnham,
Yes.
Jay Sweeney,
Yes.
Brian Bailey,
Yes.
Robert Patterson, Brian McCarthy,
Yes.
Brad Ferlin, yes. Mike Bancroft,
Yes.
Marty Van Buren,
Yes.
David Dean,
Yes.
Mike Folsom,
Yes.
David Dragon,
Yes.
David Robillard,
Yes.
Nancy Matthews, absent, and Neil Hogan.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. 13 yeses and 1 absent. Thank you, Nick. Okay. Chief out with.
Yeah, let me stall for a minute because I don't know. I would, with your permission, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of Nick Horton. Being the person on point for deer and moose in the state of Vermont is no easy task. And I've had a number of people who attended both virtually and live compliment the way you presented the information, as well as you, Mark, on wrangling a whole bunch of people, but answering the questions. I know Bob just alluded to it. But people come up to me and said, you made it understandable, a very complex topic. So kudos to you. I want to acknowledge you in front of the board and everyone who helped you pull that together. Thank you.
Okay.
It takes a village. They made Nick look good.
Okay, so next item on the agenda is item number 5, update on the trapping petition.
Food's here.
Okay, so we are going to take a break and for about a half hour. And when we resume, we will resume with the trapping petition. Okay, great, thank you.
Did we record this?
I got it.
Will?
Now I'm looking at Yes, I know.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
But it's.
Oh.
No, no.
So.
Oh, yeah, well, I have been working on. Huh? Is this? Oh, hey, Josh.
Yes. Yeah, that remains on track.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
We could view it. Yeah, so my understanding is that we don't need dinner. We could, it's like our. Yes, in the back. And no towns have strong front, you say. Let's say you own this piece of real. You can see it. That's one of the better rules here. So it's all sort of here. Which is actually a real testament to the quality of the microphones. So when I was on the other time, I had to crank the volume. It had this beautiful type of, it turned toward the Cersei and toward it seriously. Just standing at time on that line. Yeah, like, that's what the job is. Yeah. It's fine. I may be wrong, but thank you. I don't see one. Okay. I understand that the town has to. But they don't have to upgrade.
No, I think it's just bridges and culverts, right, on class 4? That's all. That's my understanding of class 4.
You want to pick up with the update on the traffic petition?
So as you know, the board asked the department to come back with a proposal on moving forward with the traffic petition. So I'm going to start out with our plan of action, and then I'll hand it over to Mark and also in the writers here. So I should mention at the beginning that the Fish and Wildlife Department needs to, whether everyone agrees with this or not, we do need to hear from various voices regarding topics. Because if we just sit and listen to ourselves, we start to believe our own magic. And so with that in mind, we are going to host a working group to develop rules that regulate the use of foothold trapping, but according to BMPs. And they're also going to consider other proposals that may be related to best management practices or other trapping system improvement associated with animal welfare, selectivity, and safety. But what this is not is a referendum on trapping. We've already literally legislated that. We've worked very closely with both the Senate and the House to craft this bill. In the petition, the petition mirrors that bill S201, which will be coming out and will be signed. So what we're looking at as a group, where all participants will be committed to working in good faith towards the goals I just mentioned, while ensuring fair, equitable, and transparent process. Vermont is the first state to pursue legal regulated trapping rules related to BMPs, so we are on the cutting edge. BMP trapping systems have been highly recommended through our newsletters, outreach materials, and mandatory trapper education classes. And so many trappers are already utilizing that technology. So let me just mention the objectives of the work. Get informed consent from participants on the process and the outcomes. Maintain an equitable, fair, and respectful and transparent process. And to that, number two, I think it's really important to focus on all of that. That's how we got to having a bill that didn't ban trapping, but actually pushed towards the Fish and Wildlife Board to develop rules and regulations, because we approached the legislature with respect and fairness, and they did too. And I need to say that, and I'll repeat something I've mentioned before, that one legislator was opposed to all trapping, and I connected them with a trapper, and they spent time, and they were open-minded and willing to listen and become educated. And the end result was they supported this bill. And at the beginning of the process, they wanted to ban it. So there's a lesson there for everybody as we move forward. Secure agreement on the final language related to the BMP rules and foothold trapping systems that improve animal welfare and selectivity, and ensure that the rules are clear, applicable, practical, and enforceable. So what we're talking about here is this is what the department's going to do. They're going to pull a group together, work with folks like Kim, who's our fur bearer expert, and other people to come up with recommendations for the board. In this working group, our proposal will be 2 members of the Vermont Trappers Association, 1 member from the Wildlife Coalition, 1 member from the Humane Society of the United States, 1 or 2, I would prefer 2 board members one member from AFWA, the American Federation of Wildlife Agencies, and one law enforcement representative, and that's the game warden. Two legislators, and one representative from the Vermont Federation of Sportsmen. And so we have a broad representation there, and we believe that's the best way to go through the process. Any questions about any of that so far?
You have to put a biologist on board.
Well, this is an associate in addition to the department personnel.
In addition.
Yes, thank you for letting me clarify that. I wasn't clear. And so that's, I mentioned Kim and probably David Sawsville will be involved and a number of other people. And the AFL member has a background, I believe. So, okay. So that's, and there's a timeline listed here, which I don't need to, I'm not going to read through it all. You can all read. But the reason I went through the beginning there is I think those were important to highlight that we are committed to an open and engaging process. And Representative Dean spoke earlier. I can't stop saying it. You know, he said if we don't do this, which by the way, I happen to believe is the right way to approach these issues. But if we don't, then they will resurrect 129. So for some who might be in doubt about the approach that the department wants to take and is going to take in terms of engaging various opinions, but within the scope of developing and crafting workable rules and regulations that meet the intent of the legislation and the petition, then you've got that sword of Damocles hanging over you. I don't think we need it. This is something that, as commissioner, I've been articulating since day one. My staff can tell you that that we need to be aware of the surroundings that we find ourselves in. So. That's the timeline.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Relative to the timeline, so you have this, the second vote of the board in October or December.
Yep.
Then the rules go through the legislative rulemaking process, right? And what's a rough estimate of how long that takes?
Depends, I guess. I would defer to Catherine on that. She has more expertise.
So, second vote is where the board votes to send it to the Secretary of State. I believe. No. That's the ICAR. Sorry, LCAR. So the timing really depends on whether, like when the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules are meeting. They usually meet at least twice a month, and you have to file the rules 15 days before the meeting so that they have a chance to kind of look it over. This kind of rule, I suspect we will probably have more than one meeting with LCAR. And so that I would say, you know, once the board votes, it would probably be a couple of months before we come back to the board for the third vote, which is when we file the final adopted rule with Secretary of State.
And at that point, that's when it's a rule.
Yeah.
Rule is in effect.
It becomes effective either 15 days after we file with the Secretary of State, or it becomes effective on a date certain that we select. So sometimes we select a date certain because we want to do some innovation and you know, we have we have the digest that we want to update and make sure people really know what the content of the rule.
Okay, so in this timeline, in this scenario, Commissioner, it looks like when you get to October or December that we have a code, assuming it's December, then assuming that it's 2 months for the legislative process and then another 15 days with Secretary of State. So we're really looking at basically these rules going into effect maybe sometime in March, if everything goes. Okay.
It could be faster than that.
Yeah.
It really kind of depends on how LCAR reacts.
Okay.
You know, oftentimes they will vote to approve during the first meeting, but I do think that in the past, when we updated our traffic rules and the sound rules for there, that we had to go back a couple times just to answer questions and, you know, make sure that the committee is comfortable.
Thank you.
So I think it's important to note that.
You got a question?
No, but I can ask after.
Let me just, the timeline seems long, and it is somewhat, but what's important is here is that we do it right. Because we're gonna live with this for some time.
I absolutely agree. I was just trying to just get a sense as so that we're all kind of on the same page.
Sure.
So I have two questions, actually. So this is in response to the Vermont Traffic Association petition.
Correct.
But is it also affected by the legislative?
It will be because we anticipate that 281 will become law. And we're opening, and as we mentioned earlier, we're opening it up. And so we'll incorporate that into the overall discussion because there are some aspects that we're going to be required to do that are really similar, by the way, which is not that surprising to what the VTA put in. But there's some additional language that the department's responsible for and that we'll need to present and work with as well. So while we got it open, we might as well do a comprehensive approach and plan.
Correct. And then how did you go? I know these are proposed members. Is that based on organizations that submitted a petition in relation to trapping in the past years, or how did you come up with the makeup?
Just known people who have interest, and I'll defer to Mark too. But these are folks we know, and have expertise. I mean, Apple, by the way, they're the ones that are really done a lot of the work with the studies around BMPs. And we know there's interest from the Humane Society and the Wildlife Coalition, just because we know from previous experience.
And another question, how often are working groups used? I know it's always, I hear a lot about working groups, and usually I feel like it's a way to say we have a group of people working on this to make those people happy. So how often are working groups used and how effective are they?
So let me say this in response to that. One, I have all of 6 months, 2 weeks on the job. So I don't have a history I can't tell you. But one thing I can tell you is that I don't pay lip service to anything. If I say we're going to do this, this is what we're going to do. And that's not what this does not represent lip service or checking a box. And I think that our approach to the legislative session as a department reflects that.
Not to take that.
Can I just say one thing though? Mark can probably speak to this better than I can. But one of the major experiences that I had with the working group was when we updated the threatened and endangered species statute to modernize it and also to include habitat protection. And that was a pretty controversial subject matter. And the process of the working group was very helpful getting us to did take longer, but I don't know that we would have been successful getting the change to the statute that we wanted had not followed that process. So I just.
So Mike, to answer your question, it depends on the complexity of the subject, different stakeholders, and the issues, and how you want to be thoroughly involved. So Kathy's example is a real good one. Put one together on bear. We actually just dealt with the bear hound people because it was basically wild dog enforcement. What we last done. We don't do one when you see our waterfall proposal here, or the deer one. Historically, the departments put together a working group one time to address quality deer management way back a long time ago. So really, it ebbs and flows, depends on your. There's so many different participation techniques you can do depending on what your objectives are here. And these are not just the panacea though. This is not what the whole process will be working through. It'll be part that'll really have to roll up their sleeves and buckle down and deal with making sure that the language is clear. You know, things that you complimented Nick about in his presentations about deer, that it's understandable, that it's enforceable, it meets the intent of folks, the intent of legislature, and you folks. So the reason we're here tonight, first, you're the most important audience. We have to work with you to create this rule to go through on the best management practice. That's our first step to do this. Do it. So the waterfall approach, no, but at one point when we had a lot of controversy, Dave Soswell put together a little waterfall team. You know, so it really, it varies a lot. But this one here is, I think from what you're, this is a very complex, it's not easy. The plus we have is we've got Kim Royer, who's been doing this work on best management practices with all other scientists all over the country. And we have all the states doing this, it's just never been put into regulation. So we're not starting from an unknown to do that. That's the real plus we have. But I will say, this is a very ambitious timeline from other stuff that we've done before. You can notice we put some dates. It seems like a long time. We want to try to move as fast as we can because we know technically what constitutes best management practice. Now it's an idea to go what we know scientifically has been studied to death. How many years, Kim? 20 years.
20 plus.
20 plus. So now we're going something that trap manufacturers supported on a voluntary basis to all of a sudden making that a rule that has enforcement teeth and everybody's on board. So I think for the commissioner's credit, it would be ideal for us to have things well in place before the next legislative session. Everything you've heard from different people here tonight. That is our goal. It's a goal. It's ambitious, and you know, we just kind of really thought, though, what's going to happen is, though, you're going to hear from people who are not going to be happy because they're not part of this working group. Well, I think any of us who have worked with working groups or committees, you know, there's a way why you see how we design the public hearings, groups of 6 or 7. You get beyond a certain number. It's hard for all 14 of us tonight and the rest of us work on something complex and it's night after night. You have to take a subset. Because there is research that's been done on how many people can effectively work together. So there's going to be groups that are left out of here. There's no doubt about it. But I'm hoping that the department staff has put a lot of thought into the people you have on here. But again, we're commissioners here tonight. We're all here. Kim's here to answer your questions or to get, you know, if there is some input that you really think we ought to reconsider how we're going about this. It won't be just a working group that gets us to where we want to be with you and you want to be with us on this process. That's what's important.
The other thing I'll add is some of the good news is we actually have some guardrails on the legislation. And so some people might want to go further than the legislation, and some people don't want to do what the legislation is. We will go back to that too. And then also remember in this process, the working group, including department staff, by the way, the working group is to help the work advise or give information, feedback to the department, but the department will come back to the board. And then we start the public hearing. So everybody gets an opportunity to weigh in at that point. So we're not leaving people out of the process, but we can't have everybody involved at the front end. It would become unmanageable.
Chris,
Yes.
are you sure that there's 2 legislatures that are willing to work on this committee
Oh, no, but I'm sure that, we'll find two. There's enough of them there that would have interest. The question is, have I spoken to anybody? No. So I think that we'll find two. Yeah, we'll probably have more than two.
Mr. I'm glad you made that point. You folks are the first ones seeing this. But felt that is really important. We had this discussion here tonight, because there's probably people all of a sudden going, whoa, imagine the wheels are spinning as people in the public see different names that the commissioner has approved to put down on here. But again, you're the working body that's going to develop the regulations. So we start here, and we'll go further, and not to say this is a plan. It's not like we're bound by this. If we all find out that whoa, we really missed something significant, we just feel it's important that you're in the loop of this. It's not the department alone doing this. The working group will be one of our tools to help.
Are you satisfied in terms of your question about the use of working groups and whatever? Because
Yes, that was.
from my world, in the environmental world, I've been exposed to it for 30 years. And for the first 10 years, working groups were not the style. And were there battles? Let me tell you. Working groups, we started and insisted on them. And we actually got wetlands protections passed. We actually got lake shoreline protections passed, because people were drawn in through these working groups. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, that was just a non-legislative looking into type of forum that government uses.
I like the idea. I like the idea that you're setting the ground rules up front and saying very clearly, or that you need to say very clearly to these as well too, that this is not a referendum on traffic. That's an established fact through the legislative process. And so starting with that and not having to have that discussion, moves you along very quickly.
That's right. The starting point is already established. So before I'll answer any and all questions as long as you like. But before I do, I wanted to give Mark an opportunity to weigh in. He's already has a little bit. Or Kim, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I got enough. I'd like to turn to Kim now too. So my vision for this, as we move through it, you're going to be hearing from three of us and potentially others through the entire process. Just what I hope doesn't happen is the last time I laid out one of these timetables when we came up with the new year regulations, I can remember the board member's name. He got hot every time because we were way behind the schedule. I said, well, we didn't anticipate this. We didn't get this survey done until, so I just beg you to give us some indulgence, but we will do the work. There's only one Kim Ryan. There's only one commissioner. There's only so many words in Dave's, but we also need your help. But Kim, you put an awful lot of thought in this. I think the benefit you have is working with your peers at a national level on this topic. And we're hoping to draw in one of the real key experts on this whole area. So,
yeah, I plan to try to approach the person who chaired the whole best management practices effort for the last maybe 15 years, and just see if he would do a presentation at the first meeting, just to try to get people on the level playing field, so that everybody has a sense of what went into the whole BMP research effort. What were the protocols? What were some of the results? How did they come up with the thresholds for measuring injury and all those kinds of things that people would want to know the answers to? Maybe get that right up out front, and then sort of dive into the conversation after everybody's had a chance to be exposed to some of the information that some of us have lived for the last 20 years. So that's the intent, and I think, in the name of transparency, we'll try to post the minutes after every meeting, so anybody can read what the conversation was and what the outcomes were. And you know, we're sort of looking at 3 or 4 working group meetings. I don't have a good sense at this point whether that's reasonable or not. So that might be something we'll have to sort of play by ear. But I think, you know, we're interested in trying this process and seeing what we can get out of it and whether we can get informed consent from most of the members or all of the members that are on the working group. It's a tall order, but we're willing to give it a shot.
Let me reiterate, 2 board members.
Marty was just raised his hand.
And I would be interested. I'm not, so I don't know if that matters. I'd be interested to hear that.
It sounds like we have a few people that are interested. So if you are interested, why don't you email Mark, copy me on that?
Yeah.
And then we'll have a sense of, you know, what we're talking about in terms of the interest. Okay.
You don't have to have traffic. Just need to be on the board.
And my guess, and Mark or Commissioner, check me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing the meetings would probably be early evening. That's sort of what I was thinking, just for people who are working.
Sure.
Just to allow people transportation. I mean, we could try to do a combine, but I think it'd be really helpful if people could attend in person, if that would influence your decision about whether you want to participate, just because I think it's going to be important for us all to sit through this process.
You probably should like to eat pizza. That's the cheapest way for the department's budget to afford to, we'll try to provide people pizza. So we don't want you hungry.
That's an actual line item in our pizza.
Ryan?
Just curious, who is gonna be responsible for choosing?
That would be us, the department, but
Not the board, that's
correct. But we want the board to select, because again, you know, if you don't like it, tell me tonight. That's why we're here tonight, talking with you. But again, we've had a unique relationship one way or another with most of these folks. And our goal is that most of these organizations have got leaders that are there and will render their choice of who they would like to have participate. I think the key thing is people coming, participating. My experience with Catherine talked about the species of legislators. I think we had probably 2 or 3, but we're lucky just to get 1 to come. But it was valuable because over the different meetings we had, all of them at least came once. And that was very important because we were relying on them to write the statutes for us on the species. So.
These organizations, the EPA and HSUS and the AWA, are they going to submit their choice?
Yeah, I believe the best way to do it is to let them.
I don't know how else you could do it. Yeah. Because they got to report back and talk to their folks. Hopefully that'd be the ideal process.
You'll be having the final say. I mean, you could reject one of their members if you. If you wanted, or
They could, but I think it would be, there'd have to be compelling reasons. Like if they had made a death threat towards me, that might be a compelling reason. But you laugh.
Yeah.
I think this is a great format. This is a great way to go about this, is getting people from diverse backgrounds to have an opportunity to align on something. It's not a referendum on traffic, it's to align on one thing that has to come up with improved traffic regulations. It's more than just an exercise, it's great.
It's also the germ that hopefully will grow where we can try to find common ground.
Yeah.
Broad, and a more broad outline, not just this topic, but this is, let's start. Oh, it's a big deal. But that's the overarching, one of the overarching goals.
So just in terms of having appreciation for this process, this traffic petition and this process, did I hear you correctly earlier state that this is probably the same process you would like to use for hound hunting?
So that's still in draft form and I don't want to get out ahead of it.
My only question is not the specifics of that, but just wondering about having this same process occurring, 2 or 3 of these happening at the same time.
Correct.
In your capacity to do this
Yes.
within this timeline. That's really where I'm going from.
And that's why this has been developed and led by Mark and his team. The other one's a different team. You're right, capacity is a giant issue. Because we're going to do it, but thank you for recognizing that. And, petitions and rulemaking is a portion of what we do as a department as well. And so we have other things that we're working on, but whatever the timeline is that we come in with, we will, all that is in consideration of our capacity with staff.
I will say, and I really appreciate your comment, but I will say is the fur bear management is one of the most important steps we take right now. So we relish the opportunity, to be honest with you, to do it. It's going to be a huge time demand. It will be Kim's full-time job, has worked as a part-timer for us. So that's the reality, and I will be, I've already had conversations, and I want to know if it takes more, because we want to do it right, but you cannot predict how much time it will take. That's the reality. But it's important. I do other things this summer. Yeah, we're not chopping at the bit, but we've been wanting to do this for some time. We need to do it. Need to do it this summer. Or else I think as some folks alluded to here, trapping tool for us in the future may not be there.
Thank you. Any other questions for the Commissioner of the Departments?
I just might ask, if you have an interest in participating, I wonder if it'd be helpful to kind of know what dates to block out that you can't do it, because we're going to try to start to set up some dates pretty quickly. And it'd be helpful to know what dates are not available in the next, for the summer, if you're taking a vacation or whatever.
Because I see, from my perspective, Kim's schedule's number 1, law enforcement's number 2 that gets involved. Mine's probably number 3. Yours are right at the top of the list with 1 or 2 weekly. I really think it's critical that board member 2 is at every meeting we have. And if you have 3, that's fine. But what I may try to do is work with those 3 or with you, Brad, or whatever, and say, well, just for meeting effectiveness, can we have out of 3, 2 that agree to be the active participants, the other be sitting there, adding support.
It's funny, I was going to volunteer to be an automatic alternate.
Great, fantastic. See, that's important, so that if somebody can't make it, then David knows this process anyways. Because it will be hard for all of us to get there. There's no doubt about it. But we will not want to have a meeting if there's not at least one board member there.
It's going to be hard for David to schedule though based on when the fish are jumped up.
Okay, so for those members who are interested, again, send an email to Mark, copy me, and include your kind of blackout periods, and also yourself too. Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioners updates.
Is a motion necessary or desired to move this forward? Or?
I think, I don't think it's necessary.
I think our motion previously is what started this ball rolling, and our expectation was we would get periodic updates on what the process, how the process is going. That's my recollection.
Yes. Yeah, previous work groups that we put together, not been put on one of those by the departments.
Okay, Commissioner.
Okay, I'll actually be pretty brief. One, welcome to the new members of the board. It's nice to have a pretty full room. And thank you for your willingness to commit. I would recommend that you spend some time talking with other board members who have been here a while And it's a big commitment. 6 years is a long time, so welcome aboard. And congratulations, Mr. Chair. I think. So I mentioned earlier, 6 months and a few days I've been on the job, and it feels a lot longer than that, but in a good way. A lot has happened, and I think predominantly, legislature. And I've talked to you all as we've met during the session. They're done, and I feel like the department represented very well this session. We were able to get 3 bills out. One, which I felt strongly about at the very beginning, was the wanton waste bill, page 411. And that's actually the law of the land now. The governor has signed that bill. And that required a fair amount of negotiation with the legislature. And I'm happy we're there, because I think if we continued to not be able to come to terms on that, it was a bad look. I think it's good for the department to be on the side that we are on that. With 201, the traffic, we're moving forward. I'll reiterate, that was a ban initially, an outright ban on traffic. And through working with the legislature and committing to giving them solid information and working to educate, we were able to accomplish what we have before us tonight. And the same can be said for 281, the hunting of coyote bill. Both are extremely contentious. And you're going to find out if you haven't already. There are people on both sides of the issue who feel very strongly, and it's our job to do what's best for the wildlife in the state of Vermont. And I just encourage you to read our mission statement on a regular basis, because I read it once a week, and it reminds me of why we do what we do. The summertime is a bit of a respite from one type of work, and clearly as we're getting into a new type of work as we put these groups together to look at the legislation. The other thing that I'm going to be working on with the department is looking at legislation proposals from the department. We're going to look at cleaning up existing legislation if they need it. And then what are things that we think we should propose to move the ball forward in a way that's helpful and shows that we are not just waiting for legislation to happen to us. And so that will be going on. And if anybody on the board has any suggestions, send them to me directly. I'd love to hear. I'll probably call you and get more detail from you. What we're going to be doing, we're going to start that process fairly soon. And it's also an agency-wide endeavor. So Fish and Wildlife, Forest Parks and Rec, DEC are all going to be working individually, but also come together at the agency level and come up with essentially a platform of how we want to move with the legislature. We're going to have a brand new legislature, not just the same people coming back. Half of the Senate is gone. They're not running again. And a fair number, was it 9 of the chairs from the House are not returning. So it's going to require a fair amount of education on our part, for people who are in positions, who have new legislators. And so I look at that as an opportunity to really fly our flag, what we do, and not just talk about hunting and fishing, and I know that's, the focus here, but all the other things that we do at the department. Habitat preservation. There was a project last week, the Stay Connected program. myself, secretary, and the secretary of transportation went out, and I'm not going to pretend that we did all the work or even a chunk of it, but we did dig holes and plant trees out in Wolcott, right by where the West Wolcott Road cuts off. There's a habitat restoration program, a wetland restoration program, and also underneath the bridge under Route 15 there is a bench that was built so wildlife can pass rather than get run over. This is an effort that the department, certainly primarily Jens, and folks at AOT are looking at all over the state to make sure that our habitat stay connected. Because with climate change and the continuing development, that's frankly the biggest threat we have to our wildlife. It's not hunters, it's not trappers, it's that. And so that's a really important program, and I want to make sure that that gets highlighted. The other highlight that we've been working on, by the way, Josh is the new PIO, new for a few months. One of the first things I did was actually create a public information office. You're all aware of his work, you just didn't know it was him. And it's part of what he's been doing is helping get more word out, the great work that the wardens do. It's super important that the people in the state understand that we do a great deal of amazing work aside from printing hunting regulations, which is important, but it's not the sole thing that we do. And so you'll see a lot of press releases coming out of Josh, his desk. And that's why it's to really highlight the great work that the folks do here. So I'm really proud of the work that the people at the department do. And if you talk to me for 10 minutes outside of here, you'll find that out, as I know I've bored a lot of my friends already. But I do have the best job in the state of Vermont because what the work we do is super important, but I have the best staff in the state of Vermont. No doubt. I've worked other places. I've never met a group of people who are as committed to what they do and believe in what they do as our folks. And we're all pulling generally in the same direction, despite what you might hear through some misrepresentation. I look around this room, these are people here at the evening meeting because they believe in everything we do. So people in the state of Vermont are lucky not to have me, but to have them. And everybody, 140 some odd folks that work there. One last thing I'll mention, the Agency of Public Safety bill did not pass the legislature. And so the game wardens are staying where they belong with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So that's my report. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for the Commissioner? General questions? Not, have a roundtable discussion?
I'm going to be done recording.
Okay. Okay.